if you care about music, whether you make it, love listening to it, love someone who makes it, or loves listening to it, I think it's worth hearing me ramble a little bit. But as an editor of a pop culture publication and someone that runs a YouTube channel and a blog dedicated to showcasing and building up independent music, I just thought it was crazy to learn that Napoleon, Emperor of the French, King of Italy, had a nephew, Napoleon III, who was the president of France in the mid-1800s. By imperial decree, started what is called the General Water Company when translated into English. And this company quickly became the largest, or one of the largest, providers of public water, like city water in Europe, starting in France and moving on to Turkey, Italy, over like the next century and some change. You get to 1980, and this imperially backed company diversifies, and all of a sudden this water company has a hand in like 2,000 plus companies and is becoming a proper like corporation conglomerate. And only a decade after we get that number and we see this company get into civil engineering and heating and whatever, they say, we want to get into media. And they change their name to Vivendi to, allude to more life or new life, per the Latin root of that term, imaginative term. They buy Universal Music Group in the early 2000s. And this is probably the clearest illustration of label under a label under a label. Like if you are a Drake fan in 2009, 10, he's with Cash Money, which, joint venture with Young Money. So YMCMB, under Republic, under UMG, wholly owned by this French water company, like this old ass money. And their priority will always be stakeholders. And UMG, despite being, as of 2021, its crown jewel, because Vivendi sold most of its shares in UMG in 2021. So UMG is now independent, but I'm going to get to that. But yeah, I mean, UMG was just another asset in a portfolio. Music in the major label system will never be really produced, released, made with, the spirit in mind. And particularly here in the United States, we're just increasingly seeing our options in media, just the things that we choose to watch, choose to listen to learn, to connect, to feel. These options are degrading in quality. They're increasing in their censorship. And to have learned what I just learned about, the origin of Vivendi and subsequently kind of UMG's story, it's just it's really frustrating as someone that covers independent artists, that is an independent artist. As of right now, ATC Sound's YouTube channel is pretty much all populated by either me doing this or my music videos. But 83% of the market share in music in terms of revenue is shared by 3 companies, Warner, Sony, UMG. UMG is never under like a third of the revenue earned in music. 1 out of every $3 made in the recorded music industry worldwide is made by Universal Music Group. And now that it's spun off as an individual company, it had an IPO in 2021, meaning it's publicly traded now. So yeah, it's not a wholly owned subsidiary or like child, of Vivendi, but one French family, the Bolloré Group, owns 28% of UMG, 18% directly, 10% through its ownership of Vivendi, which Vivendi still has that 10% stake. 20% of UMG is owned by Tencent, a Chinese holding company. And then I think another 10 is owned by the Pershing holding company. I'm saying holding companies. I'm not saying artists. I'm not saying artist collectives, unions. I'm talking about people with money, just capitalists. I'm not even saying capitalism is necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying we're talking about some of the most essential, human activity, human product, feeling and thought communicated via sound, meant to go from a person's brain and heart and soul to as many other people as possible. And the first thought that Lucien Grange has, at the end of every quarter is like, did all this shit make enough to pay fucking BlackRock, which has some ownership in UMG, the Bolloré family? Like, it's just nuts. It's really nuts, And speaking of the limitations of our options, Drake and Kendrick are meant to be antithetical and really opposite of each other, but they're both UMG artists. It still costs hundreds of dollars to see Kendrick live, right? I mean, it probably would still otherwise, but Drake got out of his deal, through Republic, through Cash Money. He talked about it in Scorpion, but it happened a couple of years later. That there are legal proceedings that you could find online. Has to do with Aspire. It's really messy, but he actually had the choice to be independent. He would be by far the largest independent artist in the world, at the top of the 2020s, if he decided to go that route. Granted, his music operation is far bigger and more complex, but for perspective, Ye, who hands off of that, but strictly from a music business standpoint, it is actually very fascinating that Ye is independent. It actually means a lot. It's just, he's kind of in his worst timeline right now. So that we don't really want to talk about the viability of anything the artist formerly known as Kanye West is doing. But he's independent and he's still doing well. Drake had that choice. Hard to really blame someone for signing a $400 million deal. but yeah, like we are routinely robbed of seeing like the value of letting a person like speak directly to us and directly supporting them. And it's just really difficult to feel like you have a choice. It's really difficult to have your own experience of shit. I mean, yeah, we have like our niches, and like pop music isn't the same because there are just so many artists out. But there's just too much shit happening in the world for people to be passive about what's hitting them, about what's being placed in front of them. when you let DJ X on Spotify run through all your favorites. Like we can't trust that nigga too much. We can't trust the machine learning. Like we should be learning us better than ML or LLMs. So I'm at 10 minutes. I tried so hard. This is like my 8th take to get this into some kind of short form content, but I just find myself pausing and talking and really caring about this shit. But Across the Culture Sound, ATC Sound, this channel that you're on, is attempting to cover through journalistic and digital marketing means independent music and support independent music and tell independent artists' stories in a way that make you really want to do something to make it easier for other people to enjoy all these cool artists that would rather not make the Bolloré Group or BlackRock money. I'm not here to even tell you these entities are inherently evil. I do think, though, by nature, just an oligopoly, just having these 3 big fucking companies control the market on something that is so pure and idiosyncratic and essential to being a human, it's nuts. It's just nuts. It really is. And there's a lot more I could say about it. There's so much writing I've done on Across the Culture, which is the parent blog to ATC Sound. But ultimately, if you care about music, if you care about giving everyone a chance to be seen, to be heard, to hear what they want to hear, subscribe to us. This won't be the last video like this I make. I'd like to get into much shorter form and informative content, which again, hopefully makes you want to do something about what we get to see and hear and how we connect, and not having people who don't primarily care about people make those decisions for us. Thanks.